Caput.
All views expressed in this podcast are the opinion of the host and in no way medical advice. Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of Caput. Joining me for episode 1 is Lee. Hey Lee.
How you doing?
How's things?
All good, Tim, all good.
Good. So Lee is here. He's going to ask me a few questions that he has about this podcast, which hopefully will inform you guys as to what you can expect. So Lee,
Well,
what have you got for me?
First things first, Tim, do you want to tell us a wee bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name's Tim West. I've been a photographer and filmmaker professionally for maybe 6 years, something like that. But I first took it up about 12 years ago. As well as that, I did a deep dive into sort of psychology and mental health maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
Really got stuck into a lot of good books and a lot of podcasts, funny enough. And since then, I've found it's been extremely, extremely beneficial for me.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I have a lot to learn still.
Everybody's a lot to learn about everything, Tim.
I'm glad you said that.
So why did you call it Caput?
Very good question. So I presume most people, when they hear kaput, they think, kaput like it's broken, it's damaged.
Yep.
My dishwasher's kaput, whatever. So I wanted that deliberately to be in there, but in fact, when it's spelled the way I spell it with a C, the way I spell it, as if I invented it, the way it's spelled for this podcast, it actually means head in Latin.
Cool.
So, for example, it's where we get words like capital, the CAP, or
Yes, the
captain,
head of state and things like that.
or
Okay.
decapitate.
Yep. Okay.
It comes from the idea of the head.
Okay.
So yeah, I sort of wanted to juxtapose the idea of the head, because it's all about mental health, with, I suppose, like a touch of humor, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's a serious subject, but I think if you can't sort of have poke a bit of fun at it now and then, there's something wrong. So I think
Certainly.
humor always helps.
You have to lighten the subjects at that
Yes.
times like that. So, Tim, you said the podcast for men. Do you want to explain a wee bit more about that?
Absolutely. So the main reason why this is marketed towards men is because I'm a man. So by default, I assume that my experiences are going to sort of land more true on the ears of other men than it will with women. But that by no means means that, of course, it's for everyone. If everyone and anyone can get any benefit from it, then I am very, very happy.
I suppose what you mean is you understand from a man's point of view the best with being through it, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And one other thing, I have to bring it up on my phone here quickly, but there was a stat that got stuck in my head. I'll talk about this briefly again in a minute, but this was from 2018, NHS England. Suicide is the leading cause of death for men under 50.
That's shocking.
The leading cause of death.
That's a surprising stat for a lot of people, I would say.
Right. And while I was at it, I got one more, not to get too dark right off the bat, but in 2020 in the USA, this is from the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control. In the USA, there was 45,979 deaths from suicide in 2020, which equates to one death every 11 minutes.
That's mind-blowing.
Just in the US.
Absolutely mind-blowing when you think of what the world figures would be of that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another reason why it's aimed at men, is because men, it's a bigger problem for men. Statistically.
I think as well, it's very unrecognised for men because a lot of men don't like to speak out about it. So a lot of that's burst under the carpet too. So the stats maybe aren't just as accurate as it could be either.
Absolutely. Which is a big problem.
Certainly it is.
It's also, yes, exactly what I hope to achieve eventually with this podcast, is bringing that stigma down. Do you bring stigma down, or do you brush it away?
Well, you're certainly addressing the stigma, if nothing else.
Addressing it.
Trying to sort of break the stigma down for sure, yeah. I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
The stigma needs to be broke down for mental health for men because there's been too much of a stigma for too many years now, and I think it does need addressed.
And I think the stats show that.
Yeah, no doubt, yeah. Speak volumes when you look at the stats. You can see there's seriously an issue there. It needs dealt with.
Yeah. You think I'd know this terminology now, given COVID, but I don't know if it's a epidemic or a pandemic or something, but it's one of those words in suicide in men.
Yeah.
I think that's very fair to say. Is that all your questions for now?
Yeah.
Right. Again, I have a couple of notes. Sorry to be so unprofessional, guys. I'm just, first ever podcast ever. So I just want to run you through a tiny bit more detail on the reason for starting this and my thought process behind it, and sort of just a bit more detail.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens to land on 3 words that begin with I. So I'm going to briefly tell you about the inspiration, my influences, and my intent. Okay. So inspiration, there's a lot. But for the sake of this, I had a very traumatic anxiety experience there just in January of this year. And that really just really made me want to do something.
Proactive.
Yeah, from even since January, the amount of things I've learned, I really want to share. So that's a big reason. It's something that I've always wanted to do, in that what is an outlet that I could use to help other guys and girls, but guys in particular, with issues with mental health. Yeah,
to get an understanding of it.
Exactly. And at the moment, this podcast just seemed to be the best medium. So that's the inspiration. Sorry, the last one was a stat on suicide that I've already mentioned, but I don't need to go over them again. Influences. So the second I, influences. So the first time my buddy Pete showed me an episode of Joe Rogan, the Joe Rogan Experience, in around 2014, roughly. And to be honest, I was like, what? You sit and watch this guy at a desk for 3 hours?
Conversation.
Right?
Yeah.
It was not for me, straight away, but it's like anything. You find a guy or a girl talking about a subject that grabs you, and suddenly you go, oh, the benefits of having a long form conversation are just amazing.
Yep.
They're unmeasurable. And the amount of stuff I've learned from just that one podcast alone is incredible. Other influences, Jordan Peterson is a huge one. Other ones, I listen to every variety of podcasts. There's a mental health one there, Man Up, which is great. Jordan Peterson's daughter, Michaela. General Banter with Colin Geddes. Can't recommend that enough. Diary of a CEO, etc., etc. So I like a really wide
range,
yeah. And the final I, third I, intention. So I've touched on this already, but what is the point of this podcast? What am I trying to achieve? My intention is to make language around mental health much more commonplace and much more understandable. And I think maybe the best way to do that is just to have regular conversations about it.
Yeah, make it an open subject, break the stigma. Yeah, totally
exactly.
Agree.
Just like this, so if you keep hearing the word anxiety and you've never experienced it, you maybe don't know what it is. Maybe just hearing enough people describe it will maybe turn it into something
that you can relate to. Yeah.
Right. Or depression or addiction or whatever it is. Next point on that is to be as honest as possible. So that was one of the biggest, what would you call it?
Key points.
Yeah, grounding points, anchors.
Well, honesty and integrity sort of go hand in hand with mental health, I think. Anyway, if someone understands you're coming across with honesty and integrity, they tend to take it on board a lot better and they tend to relate more to you.
Absolutely. And you could almost go as far as to say maybe a lot of issues that people have, I know this is true for myself, is when you're not being honest even with yourself. Even a little thing, you try and tell yourself, it doesn't matter, and it does, and then it eats away. So very important.
Yeah, totally agree.
Next point on intention is to develop a community.
Okay.
So that will be hopefully a listenership.
Okay.
Eventually.
Yeah.
And even just things that we can do through social to spread these messages. And finally, excuse me. And finally, it is to share my experiences with others, for the reason that, because I know this happened to me, I think anecdotal stuff is so powerful because you can know, oh, I'm not alone.
That's a big key. I think with mental health, the problem is so many people feel alone, especially men, as you're saying, and that's why it's been so hard to talk about for so many years, because people haven't wanted to. Pride's a big thing with males. I think that's the main reason a lot of males don't want to address that they actually have got mental health issues. Or something like this, I think's overdue, and I think it's well needed, a podcast like this where people can actually see that it's fine to talk about this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one final thing to run through on these notes before we have a bit of a chat, Lee,
Yeah.
is just a few of the topics that I have planned episodes for this show.
Okay.
Just so you might get a flavour. Is this
What's to
actually for
come?
me?
Yeah.
Is it not?
Yeah, certainly.
And it's going to be for some people and it's not going to be for others, and that's absolutely fine. So I want to do a full episode on, I've called it here, my anxiety story. It sounds terrible, doesn't it? But just like I mentioned there,
Anxiety's not a word to be scared of either. I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
People have been scared of that word for so long, and it's been stigmatized. And we just need to address these things and just talk about them openly. There should be no stigma around these words and these sort of conditions, to be honest.
Absolutely. But there is.
Yeah,
right.
Still sadly there is. Yes.
Yeah. So there's that one. Balancing. So I'll just run through a few here just to so we can move on. Balancing creativity and mental health as a creative person myself, as a photographer, filmmaker, etc. I've learned a lot around that. Routine, money, especially debt. Physical exercise, mental exercise, masculinity, traveling, humor, the concept of time.
Okay.
Ooh, big topic that. And finally, delegating as a diligent person.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Delegating as a diligent person?
Yeah.
So, again, I think that easily feeds into a lot of people's sort of maybe OCD, depression, etc. You feel you have to control everything. Yeah. No one can do it quite as well as you. Guilty as anyone in the whole world right here.
I'm exactly the same.
Right. But it's that, again, so much to learn on everything, but it's something I have learned a little bit about, I think, recently, where I can now hand off or delegate certain tasks and know that it's for the greater good.
I think it's a lot of time a control thing too. When we do that, do you know what I mean? We like to be in control to make sure that it goes the way we want it to go, because the anxiety doesn't want it to go the way we don't want it to go. So subconsciously, we're trying to control things and keep things in control, I think, when we do that.
Absolutely. So we were just talking before we started. What better thing to kick around for? Actually, only about 10 minutes we have already, believe it or not, left.
Okay, cool.
But obviously, this is episode 0. This isn't even episode 1. You know what I mean?
See how we
get
a feel for things,
as I'm sure everyone will understand. But the one thing we will quickly touch on for 10 minutes is basically we were just saying, weren't we, before we started, how has this process been? Because, of course, sorry to explain to everybody, so Caput is a podcast, but Caput is also a network called Caput Network, which hosts currently one other amazing podcast, which is...
Can I Chat?
Tell us something quickly about that.
Can I Chat podcast basically talks casually about all things cannabis based. I basically host the show with him. We're trying to address the stigma behind cannabis and trying to break the stigma behind cannabis, let people see the medicinal benefits for it, and just elaborate on that as much as we can. Yep,
absolutely. Couldn't put it better myself. I am the co-host on that show with Lee, and obviously Lee is an expert in this field. I know he's very humble and wouldn't say that himself, but I'm far from it. If anything, you'd say I'm a wee bit skeptical. So I'd say it's very different. The angle that we're taking on it, I think, is very different to what's out there, because yes, I am skeptical, and yes, you're an expert, but yet we're friends and we get to just chat about it.
Yep.
I think that's very cool.
Yeah, it means it can be done more casual front rather than sort of so strict on each other. Do you know what I mean? We can talk about it casually and we don't feel any serious pressure that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that said, what we were going to talk about was just this process. So we both work basically full-time jobs, right? Just this process over the last weekend there in particular, but the process has been maybe 2-3 weeks now, just getting all this up and running.
Yeah, getting things in motion. Yeah.
And just how has that been for you, Lee? Because I know for me it has proven to be more stressful maybe than I would have thought.
Certainly very trying. It's knocked me out of sync once or twice. As you've mentioned before, coping mechanisms for anxiety that we need to keep in place for ourselves that's basic. I've seen my coping mechanisms certainly increase this last 2 weeks because I've had to keep an eye on my anxiety a bit more because of the pressure of doing the podcast. I knew it was coming, and it has given me a wee bit of extra pressure, as I'm sure it has for yourself. You do feel that, and again, you just have to use those extra coping mechanisms as best you can. And here we are again, sitting, going ahead with the podcast. There's proof that you can overcome these things and overcome the anxiety and the feeling of weakness to overcome, to get doing what you need to do. There's no doubt about that. You just need to push on through and find coping mechanisms that work for yourself.
What would an example be of a coping mechanism for you, Lee?
Well, one of the main ones would be to take my mind off it. So if I find myself anxious thoughts coming in my mind, I automatically find something to take my mind off it. So I start to try and replace those negative thoughts with positive thoughts, or try and think of something I have to do later on the day, or try and think of something to do later in the week that I'm going to enjoy, rather than thinking of something I have to do that I'm not going to enjoy that's going to create anxiety. So again, it's just balance. Or I can go to the gym, spend an hour in the gym, just clear my head totally, go for a run. There's so many coping mechanisms out there if you just find what's right for yourself. What about yourself? What did you have any coping mechanisms to help you come across? Or
yeah, what I found recently, and I've been very intentional about prioritizing.
Okay.
To the point whereby I will actually literally do first in the day what is most important.
Okay, yeah.
And I find that very, very good.
Takes pressure off the rest of the day a bit.
Exactly, but especially, so the very first thing I do before I even drink my coffee would be do a breathing exercise.
Okay.
Just 2 minutes of just... There's this one called Breathing app. It's free and it's really good. It's just like, if you've ever used Headspace, you'll see there's one, it's like a balloon and it inflates and comes back down and inflates.
Very familiar with it, yeah.
It's basically just that.
Okay.
That's the whole app. But, you know, I'll sit and do, I think it's like, the one that works for me is it's 5 seconds in, 7 out, 2 minutes. That's it.
Just
and
balances
then,
you, yeah.
Sorry?
Just get you balanced.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the second thing that I do and that I prioritize is going out for a walk with the dog.
Okay.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah.
You get out in the air, which I think is fantastic. You move around, it's a wee bit of exercise. And also, you know, it's a bit like they say happy wife, happy life. It's like happy dog, happy life. Yeah. You know, when you've got a crazy energy filled dog, she needs her walk, and it's good for me and it's good for her. But those would be my two things that I prioritize now every single morning before anything else. I just give myself the time to do those, you know.
Well, it's a good way to get started because nature helps us all. I think when we're out of sync with anxiety, certainly a lot of years ago when I had troubles with anxiety, it was one of the first things that brought me back down the level again was nature. I started taking myself out in nature and taking photos and just spending a bit of time in nature, and it was one of the things that got me very well grounded when my anxiety was so out of sync.
Taking photos, you say?
Yeah, but just...
Oh, you can't come up with it. You can't mention that now without me coming back at you. Go on.
No, not to your level, just generally taking photos, just something to sort of... They absorb the nature, they actually appreciate the nature, do you know what I mean? When you're at home, you're looking at the footage, you realise how much you actually have enjoyed it and how much it's helped you. And sometimes I think if you go out in nature and you can't relate back that in the photos, you understand, you enjoyed it, but you can't tell how much it actually helped you. Where you're looking back at the footage, you can actually almost feel like you're there, and you see the relief that you got when you were there. Do you know what I mean? You can feel that, so you know it's benefited you and how much it's benefited you.
Absolutely. I always say to people, you know, the worst thing that can happen when you go out for a walk to get photos is you have a nice walk. You know what I mean? Like if you don't get anything,
yeah, you
still had a great walk.
Yep.
You know, even if you take yourself away up to the country.
Still beneficial, yeah. Totally
absolutely.
Agree. Yeah.
You know, if it rains like crazy or the sun doesn't land where you want it or whatever, it doesn't matter. No. You still get a win. So yeah, I highly recommend that. Excuse me. And even, I know it's one of those things people say, you know, oh, it's easy for professional photographers to say just use your phone because, you know, you've got 1,000 amazing cameras and etc. But I actually do. You know, again, there's another cliched phrase that's so true though, is like the best camera is the one you have on you.
Yeah.
So there's no point in me having a £2,000 camera sitting in my car and I'm walking down and there's a lovely bird on a hedge and I think that's gorgeous. You know, the phone is the camera that I have. But yeah, of course I'm going to recommend this, but yeah, guy, you know, anyone, if you need an excuse to get out for a walk, you know, if you find it a bit difficult, maybe you're a bit depressed or a bit anxious and you find it difficult to get out of the house even, Yeah, brilliant idea is to just sort of say, go out with a phone and just see if I can get one good photo,
Yeah.
2 good photos, make up your own goal, but start with one. And you get to be the judge of what's good too.
Just to give yourself a reason to get out there. Yeah, it's a start for, 'cause so many people can't even get out of the house these days and can't find the motivation to get out of the house because of their anxiety, and that would just help them give that one step. And say once they've had that one step, they've been out that one day and took that photo, to see the relief they get from it and to see the benefit of it, so they'll go and do it again, and it just starts a cycle.
Yeah, there's so many platforms now where you can go and get good critical feedback on your photos that did not exist sort of 20 years ago. So you actually can go out with your phone, get one good photo a day and get good feedback. Think of a site like Flickr, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant place.
And again, that's giving you a lift in spirit too, because you're getting that positive feedback.
Yeah, exactly. And it's genuine. It's not this sort of just, I got 50 likes, that means it's good. It's, it's other photographers and other keen amateurs giving you sort of encouragement and critical feedback.
Encouragement's very important when you're anxious, as you well know.
Yeah, absolutely. So coping mechanisms, I think that's my main ones. Would you believe we've only got 2 minutes left?
Wow.
Has this blown by or what?
It really has, yeah.
Let me finish by saying this. I am so tense. And I just, this is another, I think this is why I want to finish with this. This is what's so important to me about doing this. I am so uncomfortable, right? And I know it'll get better, so I'm fine.
Clearly, yeah.
But I love the idea of just addressing that. It's like someone said, some clever person said, everything you want's on the other side of fear. It's like I am scared.
There's nothing better with a bit of rawness, and that's what the problem is. Everything's too finely polished, and there's no rawness left, and all the anxiety's hidden, and all the problems with people are hidden.
Yeah, I can feel that I'm red in the face. I can feel the sweat coming in my armpit. And I'm glad.
That's good. I'm glad it's not just me then.
Right now, what do I want to do? I want to just hit stop on this when we have to, which is in 50 seconds, and say, let's burn this. Let's absolutely burn this and let it never be found, and we'll do this again. But that would not be the point.
No.
So listen.
The point is to let people see it's real and raw.
Exactly. So we pretty much need to wrap this up now, Lee.
Perfect, Tim.
I'm not sure how all over the place that was or not for you, but I just want to say thanks very much.
It's genuine, and that's all that matters, I think.
Good. That's good. But yeah, thank you very much for
Thank you, Tim.
Coming on.
I wish you all the best for your podcast.
So where can people reach you and find your podcast?
My podcast will be on all the platforms that you expect to see it on: Spotify and Apple Music, Instagram, under Can I Chat. What about your own, Tim? Where we're going to find it?
So this podcast, if you could follow on, kind of amateur, doesn't put their phone on silent, Tim. So this podcast can be found on Spotify, and then shortly after that it should be available on all other platforms, iTunes, etc. If you could follow on Instagram, which is Caput Podcast, but I say Caput Network there. And the full videos will be on Caput Network on YouTube, as will your episodes of Can I Chat. Isn't that right?
Fantastic, yep. That's right.
Awesome. Lee, could I make any more noise? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
See you soon, mate.
Take care.
Cheers.
Caput.
Watch the full video podcast on YouTube at Caput Network.